Okay.
And welcome, everyone. Welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 novels of suspense. My new book, coming out in 2 weeks, is called All This Could Be Yours, about a debut bestselling author on a nationwide book tour that turns into a cat and mouse chase where the author has to run for her life, just like regular book tours always are. So it is called All This Could Be Yours, and I hope you will look for it. No pressure. It is just my career. Speaking of careers, we have a marvelous author today, Polly Stewart, whose brand new book, The Felon's Ball, is just recently out. And you all, it's sort of Ozark meets Dallas meets Southern noir. And it is gorgeously written. The setting is beautiful. The story is pretty interesting, where the story came from and what the story is about. And it's twisty and turny and dark and surprising and so Southern. The setting is just awesome, as well as everything else. Polly, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Hank. I'm such a fan, and I'm just really happy to be here with you.
That's so nice of you. Thank you. I'm a fan of yours as well. You're such an elegant, luscious writer. This book is so authentic. How do you know so much about the area that this book takes place in?
Well, that's a great question. It is set in a small town in Virginia, which is where I grew up. I moved away for many years and lived in the Midwest in California, but I ended up moving back very close to where I grew up. And I just love it. I love the landscape. You know, there are definitely downsides to small town life, especially in the South, but it's just endlessly interesting to me, the variety of people that you find in this.
Yeah, there's just a rhythm of it too. There's a rhythm and a pattern and a history of people's lives in this novel and in reality. Does that play a role in your writing?
Well, it does. You know, as I said, I live in a small town, and it is the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, and you run into people you know at the grocery store and downtown. I don't think half the people that I know here know that I'm a writer, which suits me just fine because, you know, it's material for me, those relationships and conflicts and dramas, some of which can play out across generations, just really interesting to me.
I want to ask you more about that, but I'm wondering, you know, now that you're a successful writer, do you look at your world in a different way? Are there like people say things or people do things and you sort of tuck them away for your books? Is it different to be a writer?
It is. You know, I always think of myself as a little bit of a spy. not that I don't enjoy, you know, the relationships I have with people socially, but it's just, you know, there's so much when people's lives are intertwined. I'm always kind of looking for great quotes and great moments that I might be able to use in fiction.
I love that. Author as a spy. That's that is what happens. You know, I remember seeing a mom on the subway giving potato chips to her son in this very loving, caring way. And you could just feel the emotion of that. And all through life, there are little moments like that. If we can collect and put on the page, it makes it feel very real.
Exactly. Those little details, I think, add so much. If you get attuned to them as a writer, it really helps.
And again, we are talking about, in 2 minutes, we'll be talking about The Felon's Ball by Polly Stewart, just out about a month ago. So brand new. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, welcome. It is so nice to see you. You know that A Mighty Blaze was started 5 years or so ago at the beginning of the pandemic by the fabulous powerhouse duo of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us chatting and reading and to keep our writing and reading community together and keep us discovering new books and maybe your own new favorite book, maybe The Felon's Ball by Polly Stewart. And we are giving away a copy of The Felon's Ball today. As I always say, not this one. I'm going to keep this one. You'll get your own special copy of The Felon's Ball. Just leave a question or a comment in the chat. Kathy Lanigan says, looking forward to hearing about The Felon's Ball. I read the good ones and loved it. So you have.
Thank you, Kathy.
And that's so nice of you, Kathy. And I see Andrew Ball here today. And as I said, Kathy Lanigan and Lori is here and Shannon Hansen. Shanson is here and Robin Stoll Kim Rutter and Renee and Catherine Hall. I'm Sherry. So many people today. Sherry Reebok and Renee Herskowitz and Betty Fellows is here. Love seeing you. As always, Melanie Borelli is here. Susie Baldwin from Seattle and Laura Huerta is here. Nice to see you all. Thank you. And welcome, welcome, welcome on this Tuesday. Let me tell you a little bit about Polly Stewart. Polly Stewart is the author of The Good Ones, as Kathy Lanigan so well knew. She grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, where she still lives. Her short fiction has appeared in the Best American Short Stories, and her nonfiction has appeared in the New York Times, Good Housekeeping, and other publications. She writes the monthly backlist column for Crime Reads. Do not miss that. Her new book, as I said, is called The Felons Ball. So this is the part I love, because this is the part where you get to tell me what the book is about, so I don't have to worry about spoilers. Tell us a little bit about your book.
Great. So The Felons Ball is about a family who live, again, in a small town in the South. They had sort of a criminal past. The father and the uncle of the family were involved in moonshining back in the 80s and 90s. At this point, they've gone straight. They have a pretty successful contracting company. And every year they have this big party on their estate called the Felons Ball. The protagonist of the novel is the youngest daughter of the family, whose name is Natalie. She's a yoga teacher, among other things, and very close to her family. And on the night of this party, when the novel's set, her much older boyfriend, who is also her father's best friend, is murdered. So things get just messier from there.
What a good premise. And it feels, well, tell us about this family. I know that it sort of came from a real life family.
Yes. So it was partly inspired by a case that I'm sure a lot of the viewers and listeners are familiar with, which is the Murdaugh murder case in South Carolina. And for anybody who doesn't know, it's this family who in small town South Carolina had been involved in allegedly sort of criminal shenanigans for many, many years, and kind of ran the town without any consequences. And then the father of the family was accused of killing his wife and son. That does not happen in the book, but I was just really interested in this family that just felt kind of entitled to do whatever they wanted in this small community. So that's where I started.
I love that. I love that theme of entitlement, that the rules don't apply to them and they can do what they want. And Ashley Winstead, who we love, called this a love letter to Southern outlaws. What do you think about that quote?
Oh, I just love that, because I do, I have a very complicated relationship, I think, with that kind of model of a Southerner, because morally, I definitely wouldn't say I approve of it, but they're often so charming, so fun to be around, so funny. And that's kind of what I wanted to reflect in this book is, why we find these people really fun to watch and hear about is because, they're likable in many ways, even if they're doing bad things.
I mean, there's an audaciousness and there's a fun about them, even when that they have a history of crime. I mean, that's why you call it the Felons Ball. Talk a little bit about where that title came from.
Sure. So it actually, I took it from a podcast I was listening to several years ago. This is during the pandemic, but it was about a group of men, and again, in South Carolina in the 70s and 80s, who called themselves the Gentlemen Smugglers. And they were bringing drugs in from Central America and the Caribbean, but they weren't caught for a long time because they really didn't fit the profile that the DEA was looking for. They were, very successful looking and well-dressed and educated. And according to this podcast, they still have a yearly get together that they call the Felons Ball. And I thought, well, what a perfect title for a novel.
Because as you were saying about this life of privilege, or sort of taken privilege, is that you can, it's so audacious that you can have a ball that's announcing that you're a felon. It turns out to be the party of the year. Talk a little bit about the Felons Ball, the event, where it takes place and what they do and why that feels so incredibly authentic.
Yeah, so it's set on this lake in the mountains of Virginia, based on some real life lakes in the South. And the intent of the father is to invite, the local congressmen, the movers and shakers from the community, the businessmen, the people who can help him get things done in the capital. and just sort of to lavishly treat them. But again, it's with sort of a sense of impunity, entitlement, kind of winking at his family's past. They have moonshine available at the party for people who know what to ask for. So I also wanted to talk about this cultural phenomenon that we're all kind of living through, where people maybe don't feel embarrassed about the same things that they used to. In this family, it's very much on display.
And there's sort of, as you say, with impunity, there's sort of a mode of, if you just put it right out there, nobody can call you on it, because you're sort of owning who you are and what you're doing. How do you know so much about moonshining?
Oh, well, I realized when I wrote the novel that it's probably less prevalent in the rest of the country than it is where I live. But there's a county south of Roanoke, Virginia, that's called the Moonshine Capital of the World. It's very close to where I grew up. So it was just kind of always around. When I was in college, people would have it at parties. And when I moved back from California to Virginia 10 years ago, again, I started hearing about it, and I have a friend in town who just always has it in his freezer. So, that may not be the case in the rest of the country, but it's definitely still around down here.
Have you ever tasted it?
I have. It's actually not bad. I'm not a big whiskey fan, so I like mine mixed, but it's pretty good.
And strong?
It's very strong. It's done right. Yeah.
Where else but on Crime Time would you hear this conversation? We're talking with Polly Stewart about the Felons Ball. It's a really fast-paced story. It's clearly a murder mystery, clearly a thriller, clearly a family drama. But it's, underneath this great, great crime fiction writing is so, there's so many themes of family and loyalty and trust. And I wonder, were those themes top of mind when you started writing, or did you start writing the story and those are the themes that developed?
Yeah, I think I'd say the latter. The characters came to me very easily. I was saying this a lot on book tour, and sometimes the writers I was in conversation with would kind of give me a dirty look. But this was a very easy book to write. I had the plot outlined right away.
I'm giving you a dirty look, Bob.
It's never happened before. I'm sure it'll never happen again. It was a one-time thing. But I did the themes of loyalty and just what people will be willing to do for their family really came to me as I was writing. I didn't know how prevalent that would be.
Was it fun to see that evolve? I mean, you say you had an outline, so you had a story, but you had to write the story to figure out what it meant.
I think that's really true. And part of it is I really always go in wanting to think of the characters as people I would like, people I'd want to hang out with. And the more I got along in this book, I thought these people are not making decisions that I can really get behind. But I enjoyed that about them. They're risk takers, which I, in my personal life, am not. So.
That's so funny, because I was going through the cast of characters when you were talking about having people that you really liked. And I thought, well, I don't really like that person, and I don't know. And it isn't so much that I don't like them, but exactly as you say, is that I'm fascinated by them. I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. I wouldn't quite want to have them be my best friend, but Natalie is the main character. Natalie is wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about her and how she evolved?
Sure. So Natalie is the youngest child of her family, and she's very much one of those people who has been kind of cursed by birth order. I think she's always been treated as the baby of the family, and her older sisters and her parents there are a lot of things that they don't explain to her and don't share with her, because it's sort of assumed that she's a little bit naive and a little bit more innocent, a little immature. So she wants to prove herself over the course of the novel that she can kind of keep up with her older sister. They're all in their 20s now, so she's ostensibly an adult, and maybe isn't going about that the right way. She's making some decisions that she feels are adult decisions, but probably don't come off that way to the reader.
I also love her parents. There's such a concept of a Southern woman. And there are several different kinds, or many, of Southern women. Talk a little bit about her mother and her mother's power and her mother's methods. And no spoilers in any of this, you all. We're not going to talk about the father when we talk about the siblings, when we talk about the mother, when we talk about the friends, all those things. There's no spoilers here in any way. But her mother is really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you. She ended up being one of my favorite characters. She's a little bit based on my own mother, which I can say, without fear of offending her, because she's very well dressed, and which is what my mom always looks for in my books. So she has a beautiful home. She's been a homemaker her whole life. So she really kind of, in a way, has gotten her identity through her husband and through the success of her daughters. But you come to realize over the course of the book that she very much has her own mind about things, and there's a certain way that she wants things done, and she's going to kind of make sure, even if it means some manipulation behind the scenes, that people meet her standards.
And the manipulation is on so many levels, whether it can be an emotional manipulation or an absolute, sort of, I don't want to say housewifey manipulation, by how she treats people and how she deals with food and how she handles making sure people are happy, in the most sort of sometimes sinister kind of way, or if you look at it another way, in a really powerful kind of way. That this is not a shrinking violet, mommy. This is a powerful woman who is in a position, who's decided to keep her power.
I think that's right. Yes. So, I mean, of course, the stereotypes about Southerners is they're so hospitable and they're so generous, and there's some truth to that. But I think often there are strings attached with that generosity, and that's the case with this character. She's built this lovely guest house for her children to come and stay, and as you said, she's always putting out food for people. But it's kind of with the understanding that you're going to do what I want. You're going to fall in line with what I think is appropriate. So. Might not always be good.
And the book is such proof that there are so many different kinds of power and so many different ways of wielding that power on people, whether it's psychological, emotional, or actually physically, or even violently. Talk a little bit about how the father character came to you and how he's created.
Yes, so that was the real surprise to me in writing this book, is the father did end up being my absolute favorite character, which is funny because I was starting with the idea of these men in the Murdoch family who really probably allegedly did not use their power to good ends, and he doesn't either. But he was so charming to me. I was so excited whenever he came into a scene because he always had these great one-liners. He had sort of an irreverent, look at the world that he's living in. And he's a very loving father. I mean, he really genuinely cares about his children, I think, and wants the best for him, even if we don't necessarily agree with the way he's going about it.
Yeah, you were talking about his one-liners. Your dialogue is so great. I mean, there's sort of too many wonderful elements of this book, but in the writing, the descriptions of the setting and the sort of evocativeness of the setting are so cinematic and wonderful. But their dialogue, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the dialogue is so realistic and believable and of a time and type. I mean, you were talking about that the book essentially, I don't even want to talk about this, downloaded in your head, but talk about how people's voices came to you.
Yeah, I did. When I say this book was easy to write, I did really struggle with the first couple of chapters take place at the Felons Ball across this kind of long party scene. And as I'm sure you've probably experienced, Hank, the party scenes can be very hard to write because you're trying to juggle a bunch of characters and people are moving around. So I wanted to make sure I had a sense of how each of these people really talked, the words they would use, their ins and outs in conversation. And once I got that, I felt like I really kind of saw, okay, this is how everyone's going to act in each scene because this is the way they see themselves within the family. So that then things got easier at that point.
I mean, it's so interesting because I don't know whether people who aren't writers, and I welcome you all. Catherine Hollum is here. Robin Stull is here. So nice to see you. Laurie Hernandez, Melanie Borelli, lots of questions coming in. I don't know whether people who don't think about writing this way will realize this, but it's almost a given that you never start a book with a cocktail party, that you never do that. It's the incredible high degree of difficulty. because for exactly the reason that you're talking about is there are going to be a lot of people, and readers are required sort of to decide who's important. And one of the things that I think you did in this book so gorgeously, and we're talking about The Felon's Ball by Polly Stewart, is that it's such a tour de force for you because you pull that off seamlessly. We can picture it. We know who everybody is. There's not a moment when you think, like, who is that guy? We totally get it. How you must have worked really hard on that.
Well, that is the sweetest compliment, and also I am so glad that I'd never heard before not to start a novel with a cocktail parties. I did not follow that advice. I do have an experience almost every time I send a draft to my agent. She says, "Oh, you have so many characters in your books," and I feel like the subtext is maybe like, "Could you have a few fewer characters in your books?" But I think because I write about small towns, that's always really important to me. You know, I want to see how everyone's connected. So I'm so glad that worked for you, because it was such an important part to me of showing who this family was, that they're entertainers and they want to treat everyone. So we had to see that early on in the novel.
I mean, it's nice because you use the cocktail party as sort of a chessboard too, so setting people in the position where they are, and then we get to see how the whole game is played out as a result of that. It's just really incredibly done. I was thinking about what you were saying earlier about how everything that someone gets from someone in the book has a string attached, and the book is all about secrets as well. Did you know what everybody's secrets were when we'll be really careful? Did you know what everybody's secrets were when you started writing the book, or did they reveal themselves to you as well?
No, I didn't. I did, I had a sense of the ending. I had a sense of sort of the major beats I was going to hit. But, the sisters in particular are really they're all hiding things, particularly from the main character, from Natalie. And I knew there was going to be something, but I didn't know specifics until I got into the story.
So you didn't know the backstory. I mean, so much of this book is about the past and what happened in the past and the events of the past. Did you know all that?
No, I didn't. I really just knew, I knew the order, the birth order, and I knew how each of the sisters sort of viewed their role within the family. And then I let the characters kind of develop out of that.
I mean, I hope you loved what I said at the beginning about Ozark meets Dallas meets Southern Noir. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, I loved Ozark, and I admit 7,000 years ago, loving Dallas. And one of the things about Ozark is the same sort of what people would do that they don't think they would do, the sort of incremental decision making about why something is okay. Is that interesting to you?
So why people do what they do and why they think it's okay? Is that
you take a step that you wouldn't think you would do, and then that seems okay, and you take another step and another step, and then you end up somewhere that you didn't ever plan to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I've made kind of a rule for myself in writing crime fiction that none of my characters are me, but that I always want to be able to think, okay, in this situation, if I were this person, I might make that choice. And it always has to feel plausible and realistic for me to write it effectively, I think, because they need to believe. It might be a completely crazy thing to do, but in this situation, I had no choice but to do X, and I want to feel that with them.
And I think that's important for your readers as well, because one of the things that makes a book like this fun is that the times that you can say, "Oh, that's exactly what I would do," and there are other times you would say, "Well, that's not what I would do, but I understand why that person would do it." And when you capture that motivation so gorgeously as you do, that's what makes the story come alive.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's such a kind reading, and I'm so glad to hear that, because that's what I look for as a reader too. I want to immerse myself in other people's lives that feel real to me. So I'm so happy if I can do that as a writer.
Tell me about the houseboats.
Oh, well, I had such an interesting conversation about this because my editor obviously is in New York. And at some point, I guess I should go back a little bit and describe that this is set on a lake in Virginia again, where some of the characters live on houseboats. And for those of you who might have been to lakes in Georgia or North Carolina, they look like little houses on top of a boat. And when I talked to my editor about this, I realized she was picturing the kinds of houseboats that they have in Manhattan or in London, which are very different. They look like boats, but they can be very elaborate in this part of the country, and it's really kind of like a floating party for people who have that disposable income, I guess.
So, like a house on a boat?
Yes, yeah, it's literally. It looks like you just took kind of a one-story house. Sometimes they can be very lavish and put it on top of a pontoon.
And forgive me for pushing about these houseboats, but it's so interesting because it makes the setting be very, very different to think about it being on water. I mean, it's like 10,000 times riskier and weirder and scarier and sort of more distant from everything. You're not, if I could put it this way, you're not on solid ground on a houseboat, so it's sort of metaphorically wonderful. Do they live there full time, or are they guest places or fun places?
I think some people do live in them full time. A lot of people have them as sort of summer homes where you pay for the slip. You rent the sort of part of the lake where your boat is anchored, but you don't live there full time. I did do a lot of reading when I was researching this book about accidents on houseboats, and I ended up not using a lot of what I learned. But you're right; they're very dangerous as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm sort of thinking about. When you pitched this to your agent, did you say Southern noir? What did you say? And do you agree when people call it Southern noir that that's what this is? And if so, what is that?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because in my other role interviewing people for crime reads, I asked that a lot because I came to writing crime fiction from literary fiction, and I really was not familiar with noir other than sort of movies, from the early 20th century. So the best definition I've heard is from the wonderful writer Alex Segura, and he said, "Desperate people in desperate situations." And I thought, well, that's great. That's exactly what I want to write about. So I'm very happy to be in that category. It's not how I pitched it, because I feel like I'm still a little fuzzy at these terms, but it definitely makes sense to me in that sense.
But desperate people in desperate situations could be anywhere. So what makes this, so let's just say, yes, you do have, we're talking about The Felon's Ball by Polly Stewart. Yes, it is desperate people in desperate situations with this envelope, this overview of the setting of being Southern, not just geographically, but sort of emotionally and culturally Southern. So is there Southern noir? This has to be that.
Yes, I mean, I think the term rural noir gets used a lot. I'm thinking of S.A. Cosby, Eli Craner. She's certainly not Southern or necessarily rural, but Megan Abbott, I think is sort of the queen of modern noir. So I did, again, I think these small towns in the South can have the sinister sort of darkness to them that really that's what I want all my work to explore. So I don't think I'm ever not going to write about the South. It's just where I'm most comfortable, and there's so many stories to tell.
The sinister darkness, I think, is so prevalent and so obvious in The Felon's Ball, but the Southernness is what sort of, it's the iron fist and the velvet glove kind of thing. That darkness is covered up by sort of light that is misleading and sort of tantalizing. And you did that so gorgeously in The Felon's Ball. Congratulations on this. It's a wonderful, gorgeously written Southern noir. I hope you all have realized I'm such a fan of this book, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I think we should take some questions. Oh my golly, we're running out of time. All right, Margaret, in the back room, let's get some questions from the audience. Renee says, what do people ask for when they want moonshine? Very good question, Renee.
So at the party, I think people just kind of come up to the father and wink and say, "What do you have in your little mini fridge over there?" And he knows what they're asking for. I'm trying to think in real life. I have a friend who has a standing order for moonshine, and it's delivered to a barn here in our county every couple of weeks. And I'm not sure what the wording is involved in his order, but I should probably find out.
That is as surprising to me as anything I've ever heard. You're so right. I live in Boston. We don't have that I know of. Okay, that I know of. It may be happening all around me, but I just don't know it. So this is making the whole thing be even more fascinating. Who else? Good question, Renee. Do people's initial drink choices give us hints about their characters? That's really a funny question. Got to, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I loved that they put this coupe glass with the martini on the cover, because the mother and the daughter in these books are not fans of the moonshine, and they don't drink a lot of it. So I think there's this idea of, certain people might make more kind of elegant or highbrow drink choices, while, the moonshine obviously has that kind of hillbilly flavor to it. So I think that's definitely something to be aware of.
And when you're writing a book about class and power, and it's such a dividing line. What kind of drink you're going to order is it's such a cool way of giving the reader a shortcut into knowing something about someone. So perfect, another reason for a cocktail party. Andrew Ball, hey Andy, says, do murders in a small town require backstory for every or nearly every restaurant resident? The dominoes can't help but touch each other.
I think that's right. I've noticed in the novel I'm working on now, none of the characters from my previous novels are reappearing in name, because I don't know if I want to do Easter eggs, but I kind of picture them at the verge of every scene. I really think of these people's lives kind of bumping up against each other. So I think eventually, maybe like William Faulkner, I'm going to kind of populate an entire small town with people I've imagined. But
Patafa County would be, of course, that would be lovely. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll take one more question from the audience. I want to go back to the Murdoch case, because that was so completely, provocatively, unbelievably riveting. And the sort of the way he held out until the end, trying to use all of his power and all of his connections to make this go away. What did you take from that, and what did you learn from that, or think about that?
One of the most interesting things to me about that story was the mother of the Murdoch family, Maggie Murdoch, who was murdered. It's a tragic case, but I was just so interested in the fact that she stayed with her husband for so long. She seems to have been at least partly aware of some of what was happening. And, I just think you mentioned this at the beginning, Hank, there's this model for Southern womanhood, which is, sort of standing by your man, maybe making things seem okay that men do that maybe are not okay. And that's, in many ways the way I was raised as well. So I just thought that was such a heartbreaking story, from her point of view. And I wanted to explore how a woman would end up in that kind of situation.
Well done. So completely well done. I agree with you. And again, that's sort of what we were talking about before, is that you make one decision or you rationalize one thing, and then you end up in a place that you never thought you would end up. So powerful. One last question from Margaret in the back. Who else has one more question? Okay, Andrew Ball clearly knows more about you than the rest of us do. What pups?
I don't think I've met Andrew, but hi, Andrew. And I have two dogs. I'm glad they haven't made an appearance in this interview by barking. There are often dogs in my books just because I love them and I love writing about them, but not the actual ones who share my home.
Real people have dogs, especially, I don't want to say especially, but in the South, they have dogs. We had an interviewee once on Crime Time who had a dog who kept coming into the room. And so when it came in and barked, she would give it a treat to keep it from barking. And I thought, that's not what that dog is going to think, that treat is to get it to stop barking. She's taught that dog to come in and bark and get a treat. Anyway, digression. This is, Polly, you're completely amazing. Thank you. This book is gorgeous and riveting. And the idea that it downloaded in your brain, I don't even want to talk about that. And congratulations on that, devoutly to be wished. Let's spin the wheel of fun and see who wins a copy of this book. So many people here today. This is great. Did I mention everyone? Shannon Hansen and Sherry and Laura, Susie, Betty. And the winner is Kim Rutter. That's so great. Who has a dog in her photo, meant to be. So Kim, you know what to do. You'll email me. Margaret will give you the address. You'll email me and we will email Polly's people, and Polly's people will get you a copy of your book. Congratulations. The rest of you who are not Kim Rutter, you know what to do. Run, 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 click, click, click. Get your very own copy of The Felon's Ball by Polly Stewart. Quickly, let me keep you here for one more second while I show you next week's book. Joe Morey will be here with Lime Juice Money. What does that title mean, Hank? You're asking. I am saying I have no idea because I have not read this book yet. But let's see what it says on the back. With the sultry atmosphere and ratcheting tension of the White Lotus, the Mosquito Coast, and 9 Perfect Strangers. What need I say more? This is going to be amazing. I'm reading that this week, and we will talk about it next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET. Meantime, Polly, thank you so much for joining us for the Felon's Ball. You said you're working on something else?
I am. I'm just finishing up, I think, the final draft of my new book, which is called The Glass House. And this one was very hard to write. You'll be happy to hear.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to be happy to hear about that. Join the rest of us.
I get it.
Well, I hope you'll come back for The Glass House when that comes out. I cannot wait to read it. The rest of you, I cannot wait to see you next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET here on Crime Time. And until then, remember, it is always safe inside a book.